Hi, horse friends. In today's video, we are going to talk about the declining membership in dressage worldwide. And we're also going to talk about the decline at horse shows in general. And, you know, we were just having this discussion, and I feel as though one of the main, actually there's several main bullet points, but one of them is definitely horse welfare and where people think that the association stands with it and what musical freestyles has possibly done to our industry as well.
Yeah.
So,
because you have like, you know, in the USDF, USF, and some of the other organizations and everything, you know, they have their policies listed and different things. But when things have come up and we've seen video and article and news story and everything over and over of all these really heinous ones and then some minor ones, and generally speaking they tend to just get a slap on the wrist if it's really heinous, like Cesar Para, you know, but nothing happened until there was a huge public outcry.
Yeah, and you know, people are tired of going to shows and seeing things that sicken them, right?
Yeah.
You know, we got into this as little kids with our poster on the wall because guess what? We love horses.
Yeah.
It wasn't to win, you know, medals and ribbons. I mean, sure, that was part of it, but
yeah, it's a good kind of, you know, some reward and everything else. But it's like if these people who are doing the, you know, the roll curl or something and not really going through with the back, if you look at the test, you look at, you know, what the requirements are, and these people that are just kind of putting a horse in a frame but not proper, but they're winning all these things because the horse looks pretty, the horse looks flashy and has big movement, whatever it is. You know, what is the goal then?
Yeah, they've gotten away from classical principles. And then that kind of circles back to the theatrics of the musical freestyle. You know, I understand that the musical freestyle is really popular, you know, on YouTube, on social media. It draws viewers, but we have to make sure that there are still classical principles to that, you know, connection, fluidity. The horses shouldn't look stressed out with their eyeballs popping out of their head. That's not something that we want, or should it be judged well. And to me, you know, when I go to a horse show, I want to have my horse do well. I want to do well. We want to have a positive experience. Right. So what? Yeah. Right. So what is part of that positivity? That's seeing people practice good horsemanship. That is part of the positivity for me.
And too, like if you're at a show or something and you see some of these things happening that are like either borderline or kind of like a little like, that's something somebody is doing out in public where people are seeing it. So what is happening?
Right. Well, even worse. And then the rumor mill goes, right? And sometimes the rumor mill is really correct.
Not to say that somebody doesn't make, you know, bad judgment, bad mistake or whatever out of whatever emotion and everything. So, you know, there's a lot of nuance and got to take things with a grain of salt. But it is one of those things, if it's consistent with like the same person, same trainer, barn, whatever, with the different horses, if they have multiple or just every time you see them at different shows, it's like, that's kind of a standard for them then.
Yeah.
You know?
And then we're dealing with the cost. So not just the cost of the shows themselves, but also the cost of upkeeping horses in general. So in life, right, there's been a lot of inflation, and the horse shows have seen it themselves. You know, the cost to run a horse show has gotten a lot more expensive. And then the pressure associated with that.
Membership fees, you know, and a lot of the times, especially because I remember reading a few years ago something that somebody wrote, and I cannot remember who it was at the top of my head, but you know, they were talking about that and talking about like what really keeps the horse shows going, and the truth of it is adult amateurs.
Yes.
But if they can't afford it, you know, they're going to choose the lessons, generally speaking. Majority of the time, they're going to choose the lessons over the shows. They're going to choose to continue their own education. They're going to continue to choose paying for their horse outside of shows. And so you start making it so unaffordable and so unattainable for adult amateurs, and then they don't have all of that funding coming in, you know.
I remember several years ago here in the rodeo world, the price of gas really, really influenced their ability to get to shows. You know, when the price of gas per gallon for us here in the US, you know, increases by double is what it did a couple years ago, it really does affect people's ability. I mean, these shows for us are not close.
Especially for ones like us where we don't really have that many local shows. So you're traveling.
Yeah.
You know, and for those that are in other areas that are even further, you know, because for us here, it's about 3 hours to, you know, the Sacramento area that has a lot of, a handful of different places and everything else. So, you know, that's still a trek, but it's not like going 8 hours or 12 or cross 3 states, you know, and you start doing that, you know, if you have, you know, your nationals and your championships and different things too, then you start going a little bit further,
And if you just get down to the basics and the nitty gritty. So for some of you that don't know, I own the barn here. I've had this barn for about 20 years. When I first started this business, a bale of alfalfa for us was about $6.50 20 years ago. It's now $17. And as a, you know, whether you keep your horses at home or at a boarding facility, that affects you because people have to pass on the price. And, you know, we've seen it in the shoeing, we've seen it in the feeding, in the supplements, all of those things. So I look at stuff that I used to be able to afford to do with my horses that I can no longer. You know, stuff that I could do 20 years ago, I can't do anymore. And it also makes it difficult as a professional because it's like heartbreaking, right? To try to pass on those costs to your clients. You got to at a certain point or you go out of business. Yeah. And I do know that the associations are facing the same thing too. So if you think about it, probably where are they going to cut their costs, right? They're going to cut their costs in the fun things. You know, doing extra events for people, advertising to pull in more members. That's where they're going to cut their costs. But they can't cut their costs on the footing. They can't cut their costs on the venue because all of those things are absolutely necessary to holding a show. They're going to cut their costs on the extras that make it more fun for the amateurs when they get there. So for me, if I look back at, you know, 20 years ago and what there was at a show and all of the extra little things that they would offer, whether that be, you know, donuts or lunch and that type of stuff, I see a lot of that
kind of fun classes that maybe aren't super expensive, so they don't really generate income. It's just a fun class. You know, I think about the most recent show that I did, you know, in October, and one of the classes was just a fun class. It was a costume class because, you know, it's October.
Yeah.
Halloween time, right? And it was a fairly small class. Now, the local show itself and everything, it isn't necessarily super huge anyways. But, you know, I always wonder and worry about classes like that because that brings in, you know, the kids and stuff. And then they have the adult ones too, and adult amateurs and people who just want to do something fun and silly with their horse. Because, like, you know, it's kind of neat. It's kind of fun to, like, dress you and your horse up and be like, I can dress my horse up, you know? And they're not flinging me into the wall.
But it gets everybody involved, right? It's really fun.
And it's like, you know, how long are those types of classes going to stay if, you know, they have to cut costs and you have to pay for the judge for a class like that?
Now, what's booming around here is our schooling shows. Our schooling shows, I mean, they fill up so quickly because they don't have the association fees.
Yeah.
So you don't have to pay hundreds of dollars every year to register yourself, register your horse, or do the non-member fee. So of course you don't have, you know, national championships associated with that. But when you're looking to cut costs and you're still looking to get your horse out and get them some experience, that's what people I find are doing.
Yeah. And it's also just one to get in and just go and have a little bit more fun. It's not as high intensity, you know, the energy that's out there as like some of the rated shows can be, you know, because it's not
have the pressure.
Yeah. It's not as high in, you know, what you're striving for necessarily. Right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, sure, you go, you want to kind of show what you've known, what you've learned, what you've been able to do and everything. And then the rated shows you also just want to do well. Everyone wants to do well in general, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it is a lot more pressure when it's the rated shows and you can get your scores. And
yeah, well, there's more pressure because there's more money and there's more investment, right? So when you put more investment in something.
And there's more in the long run too, you know, like schooling shows might have their mini little series and championships and stuff too, that go along with it. But, you know, in the rated shows and everything, typically, not always, but typically, you know, people are going for the long run. You know, there's a lot more classes and shows and things going for it.
So let us know your thoughts. Yeah. So let us know your thoughts on why you think, you know, enrollment, or I guess you could say, you know, class participation and attendance is declining. And give us any suggestions on what you think that they might be able to do different. So